Is this the test?
No, this is the real show, Tim.
Okay.
So, all right, hi everybody. Welcome to the county line. As you can see, we're not at the county line again. Before the season was over, I wanted to bring you to a place that was very important in my upbringing. I kind of call it my alma mater. A lot of my friends went off to trade school and college. I put a uniform on and spent a number of years right here in Miami County at Grissom Air Force Base. If you live in the area, you're at least aware of this place because their aircraft fly over our houses at a pretty regular basis. But I wonder how many people really know why it's even here, and that's really a good question. After the Japanese Imperial Navy used their air forces to bomb our Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor in 1941, we realized that strategic air power was going to be the wave of the future. And we weren't very well prepared for war at that time. So the Navy spent something like close to $500 million, which was a lot of money in those days, to build 42 naval air training stations around the country. And for some reason, they decided to build one right here near Peru, Indiana, between Peru and Kokomo. There wasn't an airstrip here. It was just poorly drained farm ground. And before the sailors even received uniforms, they were put to work building landing mats and parking pads and dormitories and mess halls and everything else that was needed for a military installation. Well, during the course of the war, the Naval Air Station at Bunker Hill trained about over 6,000 aviators, mechanics, and sent them off into the fighting Navy. When the war was won in 1945, the base was deactivated, and the Navy continued to hold lease to it, but they turned it over to local officials for economic development. It's rumored that the base swimming pool, which at that time was said to be the second largest indoor pool in the world, held a bountiful soybean harvest one season. So the base kind of stayed empty for about 9 years, and in 1954, the Air Force went to the Navy and told them that they'd like to use it again. They opened it back up, fixed up some of the buildings, tore some stuff down. A fighter interceptor squadron moved in here, along with an air refueling wing. But I think the real purpose that this base was reopened was to make a home for the world's first supersonic bomber. After World War II, when we developed the first atomic bomb, the most terrible weapon known to man, there was a few years where we were lulled into complacency because we were the only ones that had a bomb. But in 1949, the Russians developed one of their own. And being Russians and communists, they were pushing their territory out beyond their borders, which is the only way socialism can survive, is by eating up other economies. And they, like the Japanese did in World War II, knew that we were the only country in the world that could stop them. So they began to threaten us with their nuclear weapons. These were not idle threats. They had weapons pointed at our major cities. At one point, they tried to set up launching sites in Cuba, just 100 miles off our coast. During the whole course of the Cold War, we were engaged in a number of proxy wars, such as Vietnam, in which we were fighting the Russians at some level or other. And I forgot where I was going. I'm having a Joe Biden moment. Anyway, it might be the good bourbon.
Ultimately, Grissom became the home of a Strategic Air Command nuclear bomber force.
That's true.
There you go.
In 1959, the 305th Bomb Wing, thank you, Colonel. By the way, let me introduce my friends here. On my immediate right is Tom Jennings, the curator, director. You're not the curator, are you?
No,
You
director.
hire a curator, director. He's the Big Kahuna at the Grissom Air Museum.
No, I'm the big kahuna.
On Tom's right is, we've had Tim Cahoon back, Colonel Tim Cahoon, who wants everyone to know that he's retired from the Air Force now. Had a great career though. He's a former fighter pilot, former tanker pilot, former wing commander, and he's promised to talk about happy things today if we let him come back on the podcast. So anyway, back to my story. In 1961, these supersonic bombers got here. It was a technological marvel. The B-58 Hustler could fly faster than any Russian airplane could fly, so they could get away from them. It could fly higher than any Soviet missile. It was virtually unstoppable as a weapons platform, and it scared the Russians out of their socks for 10 years because if we were sufficiently provoked by a nuclear attack, we had to build a strategic force that was capable of surviving a first blow and then retaliating with such tremendous force that no enemy would ever consider attacking us. And that was the role that the Hustlers played. And that, I like to think, the Hustlers were gone by the time I got here, by the way, in the mid-70s. The last one left the base on January 16th, 1970. There were only 116 in the total fleet.
Yeah.
And I think there was 30 some here at the time that the airplane was taken out of service. They flew them all the survivors. 30 some were lost in accidents, right?
37, yeah.
It was not an easy airplane to maintain or fly. But all the remaining aircraft were flown out to Arizona to a storage facility and scrapped in 1977. How many are left, Tom?
8.
And do you have one of them?
We do. We have the oldest remaining. Our B-58 was the 4th one off the assembly line. So tail number 663 is the oldest remaining. And it's a trainer bomber.
How'd it get here?
They carted it over, or towed it over here. It had a cockpit fire in '68, and it's been sitting outside ever since. And when we moved to this location, they towed it over in the spot, and that's where it's sat ever since.
Where are the rest of them, do you know?
Yeah, there's the famed Grease Lightning that Lieutenant Colonel Sid Kubesh flew. That is at the SAC Museum in Omaha, Nebraska. There's one out Edwards. There's one at Little Rock. One down near Carswell, Fort Worth area. And Pima. I'm trying to think where else.
Tucson. Well,
Tucson.
That's in Tucson.
Okay.
Tucson, Arizona. Pima Air Museum.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's Dayton, right, Pat?
So your museum's pretty special.
We are. We have a lot of the stories and objects that you would find at any of the other large museums. It's just that ours are much closer. It's more detailed on the story and how they worked with the individuals that flew them and were part of their missions. And so you get a good feel for it and a good story out of it as well.
Can I interject here?
Please.
You're trying to do something to preserve the B-58 Hustler further.
Correct.
What is your museum's goal to do that?
The goal is to put a building over it so it can be preserved a lot longer. Right now it's still sitting out in the weather, uncovered. And in order to keep it around for future generations, we do need to cover it. And we are fundraising to do that. So we need help.
How would I do that, Tom?
You can donate to the museum, go online, come into the museum. You can send us a check to Grissom Air Museum, 1000 West Hoosier Boulevard, Peru, Indiana, 46970. You can go online, grissomairmuseum.com, and click Support Museum, and it'll take you right to our donation page. And you could give us money that way via credit card, or you can just send a check in.
Why should anybody care about a 70-year-old airplane?
Because it's part of history. It's significant about the base in this community. you talk to several people that were part of this community, and first thing they'll tell you, I remember seeing it take off at dusk, and just as it kicked in the afterburners, taking off at dusk. It was a beautiful sight. Parking my car at the end of the runway, watching them take off, or just flying over my house, rattling the dishes in the windows. And so everyone in this community has a story to tell about the B-58s. Whether they were little, they were old, doesn't matter. They all have a story, and it's important. And again, the focus on our particular aircraft is the people that were a part of it, and we want to make sure that people know that story and who flew it. We had one gentleman that comes in here quite often. He's the second or third crew chief for it, John Rasbach. Every time he comes in here, heads out to the plane, kisses the tire, says, "I'm here to see my baby," and then he'll tell you the story about what he did and how they preserved it and how they worked with it, kept it flying, got it ready for the cruise. And that's pretty cool, to listen to a gentleman like that. It's incredible.
Can I add, as an aviator, and you alluded to it briefly, but this is a truly unique airplane in aviation history. Mm-hmm. Not just that tail number, but the B-58. First of all, like you mentioned, only 116 built, mm-hmm. but light years ahead of any other aircraft designed and built at the time. Mm-hmm. Just light years ahead of what they had just been producing at the end of World War II. When you think that the most advanced bomber in 1945 was a B-29, mm-hmm. four-engine, radial engine, propeller-driven aircraft, and like you said, 61, they're operational. So what's that, 16 years later, they have a Mach 2 plus four-engine delta wing jet bomber. I mean, when it first came out, it was almost beyond belief in the aviation community. And even today, when aviators like me, when you look at that jet, you're just still impressed that, holy cow. I mean, it just looks like the word speed. Yep. And I can't think of a pilot in the Air Force who would not love to have flown that airplane, even though it was set to be difficult. But a true classic. You're just not trying to produce something that there were thousands of that happened to fly a Grissom. Right. This is unique in history. Yeah. And if all aircraft in the Air Force disappeared except 10, this would be one of the 10. Yeah. And so anything anybody who's watching this can do to contribute to helping preserve it, it's truly important. Yeah. So.
And again, with only having 8 survivors, they're not going to be around forever if we don't protect it and preserve it. So it really needs to be around for a long, long time.
And you've got a beautiful design too. You're not just putting it in a pole barn. This is with a Hustler hut thing.
It is. It's a fully enclosed one, so it'll be heated and air conditioned, so you can utilize the building in all seasons and be protected. And again, once it's under that roof, it's painted, it's looking sharp, it'll be that way for many, many years beyond that. So yeah, it's special.
What else would this exhibit building have that might offer a glimpse into the history of the aircraft and the people?
That's a very good question. And
thank you.
Looking behind me, some of the exhibits that we have, like back over here, we have Captain Manuel Rocky Cervantes. He's one gentleman who died in a broken arrow on the base, and we have pictures for it as well. Kind of tells the story what happened. The other gentleman back here, Lieutenant Colonel Sid Kabesh, he set the record for flying from Tokyo to London in 8 hours and 35 minutes, and that record still stands today as the longest sustained supersonic flight. This exhibit right on this side over here talks about Major Dick Blakesley. He died, and his crew died in an accident in McKinney, Kentucky. And so sharing that story about all of the individuals, whether they died, lived, set records and whatnot, it's important to know that the people that were in that plane knew the dangers, knew the risks, yet they got in it every day. And that's important. You know, they didn't have to do it. They could have said, no, I don't want to go in there, it's too risky. But they did it anyway, and that's important to know.
I'm sure, you know, people who've served in the military, and certainly you, Tim, understand what it's like to strap yourself into an airplane, which is a dangerous thing to do to begin with, and know that you're flying into a combat situation. Yeah. And it occurs to me that, and you were with the Strategic Air Command for a long time.
I was when I first started flying KC-135s, and yes, I was on alert. Yes.
I guess maybe you could explain what the whole alert thing was all about.
Okay.
Why did we do that? Do we still do it?
We are prepared
secret?
to do it, but we don't do it 24/7 like we did then in mass. But the few remaining units of bombers and stuff, there are plans where they could stand up to that.
What is it?
Well, if you go back, you were talking about the Cold War, which technically ended in 1994, boy, 30 years ago now. It's pretty amazing. But, you know, NATO and the U.S. in particular were because the Soviet threat was so great, and that the Soviets had nuclear missiles and nuclear bombers and nuclear armed submarines, our strategic concept was mutual assured destruction. And the idea was, like you mentioned earlier, if you attack us, we can absolutely guarantee you that we will respond in kind, and the response will be assured, and it will be so tremendous that the Soviet Union will cease to exist as a nation at that point. And to do that, first of all, we had to procure all these bombers and missiles and nuclear armed submarines. And ultimately, all of them could be used in that response. But to make that threat real, they had to know it could happen immediately. And the only way you can do that is, at that time, across the U.S., we had Strategic Air Command, SAC bases, with typically 4 nuclear-armed bombers and 4 tankers that were, the crews literally lived in a dormitory on the ramp next to those airplanes, and they were pre-flighted and ready to go at a moment's notice. And then there were a whole series of response levels that the president could order, that then Strategic Air Command would direct happen. And it could be 3 a.m. and the klaxon, this obnoxious bang, bang, bang would go off, and literally you would jump out of bed, pull on your flight suit and your boots, and run out to depending upon how far it was, you either ran physically or you ran out and got in your pickup truck and drove out there. But there was they were prepared to start instantaneously. And then there was a series of messages that you would get and that you would taxi out. And in theory, worst case, you would get the message that you would take off and you would go to a pre-planned target. Every bomber had a specific pre-planned target that the National Defense Authorities had selected in advance. And in theory, you would get there and they would drop their nuclear weapon. Well, to get from the U.S. to the Soviet Union took a lot of gas, and even though a B-52 or a B-58, or previous to that, the B-47 could carry a lot of gas, it couldn't get there unrefueled. So the tankers that were on alert were going to launch and meet these bombers or fly with them to a certain point and refuel them, top them off again so that they could make it all the way to their target. And to be honest, both the tankers and the bombers probably were never coming home again. Not only were they potentially going to be shot down by the Soviets, but at the end of their mission, the odds of them being able to get somewhere and successfully landing weren't very great. And
where would you go? I mean, if the
well,
world
the
was
entire
pretty
world
much
had been
blown
surveyed,
up.
and there were lots of, well, certainly European countries and other countries that had airfields that were deemed sufficiently good or long enough that if you could reach there, you could land there. There were even places out in the desert where they had looked at it and said, you know what, you could probably land there. It's flat enough. There's no big boulders in the way or whatever. Now, you might not ever clearly take off again, but you could potentially survive that. But it was an excruciatingly detailed plan, and every crew studied their designated mission every time you came on alert. Every 6 months to a year, you had to certify before the wing commander in about a 2-hour dissertation on your mission, so that if you lost all your paperwork, you could practically fly it almost blindfolded. And interesting enough, we even had these special reflective curtains that you could install in the windows, that if you were in the vicinity of a nuclear weapon exploding, you would not be blinded. We carried eye patches so that you could wear this eye patch and fly one-eyed. And it would be blinded, but your other eye would not be blinded. But it was all,
like
every tiny step. Well, it was like a pirate, but every tiny thought that went into it over the years that it was developed and refined was all about making the threat real. Don't attack us or we will destroy you. And it worked, because the Soviets, like you said, in '49, they got a nuclear weapon. The Soviet Union expanded after World War II. So we went from, well, that's almost 50 years in this Cold War. And of course, there was no nuclear war. Right. And ultimately, we beat the Soviets. The Soviet Union, dissolved. And in '94, we disbanded the Strategic Air Command. President Bush took the alert force down from instantaneous response. But in the military, still trying to be prepared. We still have B-52s, we still have B-1s, we got B-2s, and we certainly have KC-135. So those crews, there are plans that you could stand up the force to an alert status. It's just we don't do it 24/7 today like we did then. So.
Gotcha.
I know we're running out of time, but the point I was driving toward was if in 1965, if you're sitting at home watching Ozzie and Harriet with your family and having a bourbon and a cigar in the evening, it's easy to forget that the Russians have a bunch of missiles pointed in our direction, and that if bombers come this way, our bombers will only have 15 minutes notice to get up in the air. I mean but the people standing alert and their families who are home by themselves probably never forgot that.
No.
I mean, it was a reality.
As you're aware from being here during the 70s, there were only certain locations on base that the alert force people could go while they were on alert, that the klaxon was installed in buildings across the base. There were flashing lights so that even in a practice, the klaxon would go off and the alert crew might be at the officers club or the base exchange, and they would run to their trucks and drive as fast as they could go across base, their lights flashing, their klaxons going off out to the ramp. In civilian life, and you're old enough to recall, in school we had duck and cover drills as little elementary kids, which was sort of silly. Get under your desk and, do this. Civil defense shelters were in every city. They had that yellow and black triangular design, and those facilities were, in theory, bomb shelters with things. So, and there were civil defense commercials on TV and what to do in the event.
It was a
and there were
scary
sirens.
time. Yeah.
So today we almost would laugh at that, but it was serious business. And of course, there were still millions of veterans alive, and they probably had a better appreciation of the military and the threat. So you lived it every day. I mean, did you sit and think about it every day? No, but it was always there in the background.
As SAC built up their capabilities and demonstrated to everybody in the world that they could do what they said they were going to do, I read once that Robert McNamara, when he was Secretary of Defense, asked the question that could the United States, even if sufficiently provoked, have the will to completely destroy and annihilate another country? And somehow these people who flew these bombers like you knew that they could do that job if they had to. That's
Certainly
a hell of a responsibility.
A different culture then than today, although I'd like to think that our military today would follow the orders of, that order, that decision comes directly from the president. He's the only person who can order that. And then once that happens, of course,
Henry Fonda, right?
Yeah.
Fail safe.
But I think the culture believes so strongly in our country and our way of life that we thought we just believed it. Well, if they're going to threaten us or they're actually taking steps to destroy us, you have no choice. You must do this. It is your duty and your responsibility to no matter how frightening it may be. It was, at that point, it was the only choice. And you didn't sit around on alert and talk about it like, oh my God, I might die. I mean, you never once thought about it. It was just, this is my duty. I will do it. And even on the tanker side, like I said, because we weren't going to drop a bomb, but we were a direct part in making it happen. There were procedures where that bomber could say, give me all the gas you have. And there was a tiny fraction left over to, in essence, make a controlled crash landing at that point. And if that bomber said that, pumps are going on, and you're going to pump until you're dry, basically. And you wouldn't have gone, no, I'm not going to give you my gas, I might die. You believed it was right and necessary. And
as an airman,
maybe I'm sounding over the top, but I certainly felt that way. And I believe in my heart that every one of my crew members and my co-unit members felt the exact same way. They wouldn't have volunteered to do that. That was voluntary duty. You didn't get drafted into the Air Force to be an aircrew member.
Right.
You volunteered, and you knew early on. Maybe there were some people who said, I don't think I want to have that duty. But the people who accepted that duty,
volunteer or not,
they volunteered, and they were there, and they stuck
responsibility.
with it. Same with strategic missile crew members. We still have, now, for the audience, we do still have nuclear armed missiles on 24/7 alert. And in North Dakota and in Montana, and they are ready to turn. You have to have 2 keys and all these messages, but they're there. The nuclear armed submarines, exact same thing. The only thing that happened in '94 was that the nuclear armed bombers and supporting tankers were taken off alert. But there's no way to take a missile and just park it and say, hey, I'll bring it up in a few days and get it ready. You don't put a nuclear armed submarine in port and go, you know what, I think I'm going to send it out. Now, of course, there's some in port while others are out, and you can upgrade the status by sending more out. But there are subs out there right now who the captain is waiting for the order.
We're here to talk about
launches.
airplanes,
Yeah.
not
So-
submarines. Unless you want to sing in the
Well,
Navy
I went to a
with
change
me
of command
again.
for the Navy unit at Purdue yesterday, and the guy who's taking command is a career nuclear submarine guy. So
How about that?
Yeah.
Well, so you had to throw that in. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
That's why it's on my
we're
mind.
out of time, but we'll be back next week, and I hope to talk with Tom and Tim a little bit about some of the aircraft that Tom has on exhibit here that actually played a role in the base history. So until next week, God bless. Peace was their profession.
there you go.